Dr. Hill will give a little bit more information on the study and some of our findings.
Well, this is a study that's really close to my heart because I love youth. We had 796 participants, and out of that 796 participants, 485 of those were Black or African Americans, and 245 of those were male, and 240 were female. 220 of the study were white, with 115 male and 105 female. And then we also included Hispanics in the study because I thought that was important as well. So we had 91 as a total, and we had females 47, and males 47 and females 44. And as my research partner has stated, this was a study in which I really grew very tired of seeing data. There's data all over the place talking about youth, domestic violence, and all those kinds of things. But to me, until you put a face behind the data and actually delve into the causes, and we weren't interested in the data. We know the data. We can spew off the data off the top of our heads. But what we wanted to do is go in and find out what are the root causes. And this study, to me, is one of the most valuable studies that I have ever done, and because it actually talks to youth. And what we did was we put youth in situationals. And first of all, let me just say this. The information we received from our youth participants was confidential. If you do not win the confidence of people who are involved, whether it's domestic violence or any other area, crime, violence, and whatever, people are just not going to share things with you. And so what we did was that we made sure that they felt that they were protected and that their confidentiality was protected as well. And sometimes just sitting, eating, talking, kids will say things to you that will spark a discussion about something else. And the domestic violence issue came up really in discussion because a young lady had gotten hit by her boyfriend. And so that's how we really started off with that. And from that, we began to do situations, what if? And then we did the surveys along with that. And we were totally shocked to find that in the area of domestic violence, we have some real issues. We have some issues where there seems to be no longer a value system in terms of hands off. And actually, you know, it was like no big thing. And this, it really disturbed me because I heard young ladies not be too concerned about being violated. And I heard young men think that it was nothing. You know, when they began to give some of the reasons for why, she pissed me off. She was talking to a friend of mine. She didn't do what I told her to. Those kinds of things. And so we were able to collect this data, in which we will talk about a little bit more when we get into the other discussions that we have. But the value of the data, pure and simple, is that it gives some reasons, and these reasons are coming from actual youth. And that's important. But that information also linked to parents. And we saw that where there were domestic problems within families, you tend to have seen either the young ladies being acceptant of domestic violence and the young men being to the point where it doesn't matter. I mean, this is something I grew up with, and so therefore, they were either one extreme or the other. We're not going to do it, or this is something that we've seen being done, and so therefore, it's just a way of life.
Can I ask a question? In your research with the young women, what was their relationship with their father? Do you think that ties in with their acceptance of the way they're treated?
I think it does to a certain extent. I don't want to go into that data here because we didn't bring that data with us, but I can tell you this, that very much it did and it did not. And I know that's sort of a question like, well, you're not really answering the question, because there were some situations where there were fathers involved. And pretty much they were good fathers, but young ladies got caught up in the domestic violence circle simply because they were dating someone who had different values. And so that's what I mean by yes and no. The young ladies that were more accepting of the domestic violence, it was interesting because those who had seen the violence in their home, it's not that they were accepting of it, but they were sort of numb to it to a certain extent. But for the sake of having a boyfriend, a lot of times the popular boyfriends, they were willing to take that abuse. And so, I mean, you know, it's sort of scary, but that's the way it was.
I think one of the issues that your question gets to is when you begin to normalize violence as sort of a normal occurrence. And I think to get to what Dr. Hill was talking about, when you have children who, if you look at any data set, when you have children who are growing up in and living in situations where their household is violent, whether it's a mother being abused by a boyfriend, or a mother being abusive, or a father being abusive, it does impact how a child's life develops over time. And so if violence and personal domestic violence becomes normalized for a child, they do become numb. And it does become something that for us, for someone who's never experienced that sort of violence so close to home, you're shocked by it. Like, how could you live through that? How could you deal with that on a day-to-day basis and not be horrified? But if you're a small child and you see your mother being beat to a pulp, and you see, especially if you have a mother who stays for whatever reason, there's a variety of reasons why women stay in those sort of relationships, it does begin to build up that feeling that this is normal behavior. And children do tend to seek out in their personal relationships, boys as well, and women that they date, girls and men that they date, it often is patterned after their parents' behavior. And so it does have an impact. It's not deterministic, meaning just because your mother was abused doesn't mean that you're going to be an abuser, right? Or you're going to be someone who is abused. So it's not a guaranteed thing, which I think is what Dr. Hill was saying. It's not always that black and white, but it does have a really important impact on a child's development.
And you become desensitized, and it's not just the violence in the home, it's the violence on television.
We were talking about that, I believe it was last
Yes.
week, how our children are being desensitized
Yes.
by TV,
Absolutely.
by the violent video games that are out there now.
Absolutely.
I mean, violence is everywhere.
And they don't seem to get it. It's like if you knock someone down and knock their teeth out, that's mild. Because what they've just seen is a movie or something on television where someone has been shredded to pieces, you know, all those kinds of things. And so what we see on television is impacting as well. And like you said, video games and the environment. We have come to a point where we're a very violent culture now. And it's like we're accepting that. And because of that, it is adding to the issues with domestic violence. It certainly is. It's feeding it.